Hey everyone, welcome back to The Talking Room. I'm Alex, sitting here with Maya, and we've got a good one today.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to this one. How are you doing, Alex? You seem a little tired today.
You know what? I am. I was up late last night writing down my goals for next year, and then I started questioning everything I wrote. So here we are, running on 4 hours of sleep and a lot of doubt.
That's funny because that's exactly what we're talking about today. 2026 goals. Why most of them might be completely wrong. And honestly, I think your late night crisis is the perfect way to start.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in the same place right now. End of the year coming, everyone's making lists, setting intentions, buying new planners, but are we actually doing it right?
That's the question, and I have some opinions, so let's get into it.
Let's do it. So, Maya, when you hear someone say, I'm setting my goals for 2026, what's your first reaction?
Honestly, a little skeptical. Not in a mean way, but I've seen so many people, including myself, set goals that sound great but mean nothing. Like they look good on paper, but there's no real intention behind them.
What do you mean by no real intention? Because I think most people believe they're being intentional when they write things down.
Yeah, but writing something down doesn't make it real. Like someone says, I want to get in shape. Okay, great, but why? What does that actually mean to them? Is it because they saw someone on social media with a nice body? Or is it because they genuinely feel unhealthy and want to change?
So, you're saying the problem starts with the motivation itself, not just the goal.
Exactly. Most goals are reactions, not decisions. Someone sees a friend buy a house, suddenly everyone around them wants to buy a house. It's not about what they actually need, it's about keeping up.
Okay, but I'm not sure I fully agree with that. I mean, isn't it normal to be inspired by other people? If I see someone doing well, maybe that pushes me to want more for myself. What's wrong with that?
Nothing's wrong with being inspired, but there's a difference between inspiration and imitation. Inspiration says, that's possible. Maybe I can find my own version of that. Imitation says, I want exactly what they have, even if it doesn't fit my life.
That's a fair point. I guess the question is, how do you know which one you're doing? Because in the moment, it all feels the same.
That's the tricky part, and I don't think most people stop to ask themselves. They just write the goal and move on. No real reflection, no honesty about where it came from.
So let's say someone's listening right now and they've already made their 2026 list. What should they ask themselves to check if their goals are real?
I'd start with a simple question. If no one ever knew you achieved this goal, would you still want it?
Ooh, that's a tough one, because a lot of goals are tied to identity, to how we want others to see us.
Right, and that's not always bad. But if the only reason you want something is to impress people or prove something, that's a weak foundation. You'll quit the moment it gets hard because there's no internal drive.
I think that's true for things like fitness or money. But what about relationships, career? Those are inherently social. You can't separate them from other people.
You're right, but even then, you have to ask, am I doing this for connection or for validation? Like someone might say, I want to find a partner in 2026. Okay, but is that genuinely because they want companionship or because they're embarrassed to be single at family dinners?
And both can be true at the same time, right? That's what makes this complicated.
Totally. It's never black and white. But the more honest you are about the mix, the better your chances of actually following through. Because when the excitement fades, and it always does, you need something real to hold on to.
Let's talk about that, the excitement fading, because I think that's where most goals die. People start strong in January, and by March, it's over. Why does that happen?
I think it's because people confuse motivation with discipline. Motivation feels amazing. It's that rush when you first decide to change something. But it doesn't last. It's like a spark. If you don't build a fire around it, it just goes out.
So you're saying motivation is unreliable?
Very unreliable, and I think people put way too much faith in it. They wait to feel motivated before they act. But that's backwards. You have to act first, and sometimes the motivation comes after. Sometimes it doesn't come at all, and you do it anyway.
That's hard to hear, though, because it sounds like you're saying just force yourself to do things you don't feel like doing, and that's exhausting.
It is exhausting if you're forcing yourself toward the wrong goal. That's why the first part matters so much. If the goal is real, if it actually means something to you, then discipline feels different. It's not punishment, it's commitment.
I like that distinction. Discipline as commitment, not punishment. But here's my question. How do you build that discipline? Because I think a lot of people want to be disciplined but don't know how to start.
I think it starts with making the action smaller than the resistance. Like if your goal is to read more, don't say, I'll read for an hour every night. Say, I'll read 1 page before bed. It sounds silly, but it works. You're training the habit, not testing your willpower.
So you're lowering the bar on purpose.
Exactly. And once the habit is there, you can raise the bar slowly. But most people do the opposite. They set the bar impossibly high from day one, fail a few times, and then give up completely.
I've done that so many times, especially with exercise. I'll say, I'm going to the gym 5 days a week, and by week 2, I'm going 0 days.
Because 5 days a week is a huge commitment if you're starting from nothing. Your brain resists it. It feels like too much change too fast. But if you said, I'll do 10 minutes of movement every day, you could actually stick with that.
Okay, but here's where I push back a little. Isn't there a risk of setting the bar too low? Like, if I only commit to 10 minutes, maybe I'll never push myself to do more. Maybe I'll stay comfortable forever.
That's a valid concern. But I think the bigger risk is doing nothing at all. And in my experience, once you build the habit of showing up, you naturally want to do more. The 10 minutes becomes 20. The 1 page becomes a chapter. You build momentum.
So it's about trust, trusting that small actions lead to bigger ones over time.
Yes, and trusting yourself. Because every time you keep a small promise to yourself, you build self-trust. And that's the foundation of everything else.
Let's stay on this idea of self-trust for a second, because I think a lot of people have broken that trust with themselves. They've failed at goals so many times that they don't believe they can change anymore. How do you rebuild that?
That's such a good question. And I think the answer is you start really small, like embarrassingly small. You pick one tiny thing you can do every day and you do it no matter what. Not because it's impressive, but because you're proving to yourself that your word means something.
So it's less about the goal and more about the pattern.
Exactly. You're rebuilding the relationship with yourself, and that takes time. You can't rush it. But every day you follow through, even on something small, you're sending a message to your brain. I can be trusted.
I think that's really powerful, and it makes me think about how we measure success. Because if the goal is just the outcome, like losing 20 pounds or making more money, you might miss all the growth happening along the way.
Right, and if you only focus on the outcome, you'll feel like a failure until you get there. But if you focus on the process, on who you're becoming, you can feel successful every single day.
Okay, but let's be real. Outcomes matter too. At some point, you have to actually achieve something. You can't just say, well, I didn't lose the weight, but I grew as a person. That feels like a cop-out.
I don't think it's a cop-out. I think it's about balance. Yes, outcomes matter, but if you obsess over them, you'll either burn out or quit. The people who actually achieve big things are usually the ones who fell in love with the process first. The outcome was just a byproduct.
Do you really believe that? Because I've seen a lot of successful people who were completely obsessed with the outcome. They wanted the money, the status, the win, and they got it.
Some of them, sure, but how many of them are actually happy? How many of them achieved the thing and then felt empty? I think outcome obsession can get you somewhere, but it doesn't always get you somewhere good.
That's fair. I guess I'm just wary of the other extreme, where people use enjoying the process as an excuse to never actually accomplish anything.
That's a real danger too, and I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. You need a clear outcome to aim for, but you also need to enjoy the daily work. If you hate every step of the journey, something's wrong, either with the goal or with your approach.
Let's shift a little. We've been talking about why goals fail, but I want to dig into something specific. Why do people quit quietly? Because that's what usually happens, right? It's not some dramatic moment. No one says, I officially give up on my goals. They just stop talking about it. They skip one day, then another, then a week, and eventually the goal just disappears.
Yeah, it's never a big announcement. No one says, I officially give up on my goals. They just stop talking about it. They skip one day, then another, then a week, and eventually the goal just disappears.
Why do you think that happens? What's going on psychologically?
I think it's a combination of things. First, shame. When you start failing, you don't want to admit it, so you go quiet. You avoid the topic. Second, there's no accountability. If no one's checking in on you, it's easy to let things slide. And third, the initial excitement is gone, and there's nothing to replace it.
So it's like a slow fade rather than a sudden stop.
Exactly. And I think that's why people repeat the same cycle every year. They set goals in January, quietly abandon them by spring, feel guilty about it all summer, and then start fresh again in the fall. It's like a loop.
That loop sounds exhausting. How do you break it?
I think you have to be honest about it first. Like, really admit to yourself, I've done this before. I know how this ends. And then ask, what's going to be different this time? If you can't answer that question, you're probably going to repeat the same pattern.
So awareness is the first step.
Yes, and then action. But not just any action. Deliberate, small, sustainable action. Not a big dramatic overhaul, just 1 or 2 real changes that you can actually maintain.
Let's talk about clarity, because I think a lot of goals fail not because people lack motivation, but because they don't really know what they want. They have this vague idea, but it's not specific enough.
Totally agree. Vague goals lead to vague results. If your goal is be healthier, what does that even mean? Does it mean losing weight, eating better, sleeping more, running a marathon? You have to define it clearly, or you'll never know if you're making progress.
But here's the thing. Sometimes people don't know exactly what they want. They just know they want something different. Is that okay?
I think that's a valid starting point, but you can't stay there forever. At some point, you have to get specific. Otherwise, you're just wandering, and wandering feels like progress, but it's not.
How do you move from vague to specific? What's the process?
I think it starts with questions. What am I dissatisfied with right now? What would my life look like if that changed? What's one thing I could do this week to move in that direction? You keep narrowing it down until you have something concrete.
That sounds simple, but I think most people skip that step. They just grab a goal off the shelf without really thinking about it.
Right, and that's why so many goals feel borrowed, like someone else's dream that you're trying to live, and that never works. You have to find your own version of success, not copy someone else's.
Let's talk about something uncomfortable. Fear. Because I think fear is behind a lot of failed goals, but people don't like to admit it.
Oh, absolutely. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of actually succeeding and having to maintain it. Fear is everywhere in this process.
Fear of success? That sounds strange. Why would someone be afraid of getting what they want?
Because success changes things. If you lose the weight, now you have to keep it off. If you get the promotion, now you have more responsibility. If you start the business, now you're exposed to criticism. Success isn't just a reward, it's a new set of challenges.
So some people sabotage themselves unconsciously to avoid that.
I think so. Not everyone, but more than we realize. And it's not because they're weak or lazy, it's because change is scary, even good change.
How do you overcome that kind of fear? Because it's not something you can just logic your way out of.
I think you have to expose yourself to it slowly. Like, instead of making a huge leap, you take small steps toward the thing you fear. And each time you survive it, the fear gets a little smaller.
So it's about desensitization.
Kind of, but also about building evidence. Every time you face a fear and nothing terrible happens, your brain updates its belief. Oh, this isn't as dangerous as I thought. And over time, that fear loses its power.
I want to go back to something you said earlier about identity. You mentioned that some goals are really about identity, about who we want to become. Can you expand on that?
Sure. I think the most powerful goals are identity-based. Instead of saying, I want to run a marathon, you say, I want to become a runner. Instead of, I want to write a book, you say, I want to become a writer. The shift is subtle, but it changes everything.
Because now it's not about one achievement, it's about a whole way of being.
Exactly. And when your identity shifts, the behaviors follow naturally. A runner doesn't have to force themselves to run. They just run. That's who they are.
But identity shifts are hard. You can't just decide to be someone different overnight.
No, you can't. It takes time and repetition. Every time you do the thing a runner does, you reinforce that identity a little more. It's like casting votes for the person you want to become. Enough votes, and that becomes who you are.
I like that metaphor.
casting votes. It makes it feel less like a transformation and more like a gradual evolution.
That's exactly what it is, and I think that's more realistic than the overnight change people hope for.
Let's talk about systems, because I've heard people say, forget goals, just build systems. What do you think about that?
I think it's partially true. Goals give you direction, but systems give you progress. If your goal is to write a book, your system is writing 500 words every day. The goal tells you where to go, the system gets you there.
So you need both.
I think so. A goal without a system is just a wish, but a system without a goal can become aimless. You need the destination and the vehicle.
That makes sense, but here's my concern. What if your system isn't working? How do you know when to adjust?
Good question. I think you have to track your progress honestly, not just feel-good tracking, but real data. Are you actually moving forward? If not, something needs to change. Either the system is wrong or the goal needs to be redefined.
So you have to be willing to adapt.
Absolutely. Rigidity kills progress. The best plans are flexible enough to survive reality.
Let's talk about long-term thinking, because I think a lot of goals fail because people only think about the next few months. They don't consider where they want to be in 5 or 10 years.
That's such a big one. Short-term thinking is comfortable. You can see the finish line. But real change usually takes years, not months. And if you're not willing to commit to that timeline, you'll quit too early.
How do you stay patient when progress is slow?
I think you have to celebrate small wins. Not in a fake, self-congratulatory way, but genuinely acknowledge when you're moving forward. That keeps you motivated even when the big goal still feels far away.
And what about setbacks? Because everyone faces them. How do you keep going when things go wrong?
Setbacks are part of the process. Anyone who's achieved anything meaningful has failed along the way. The difference is they didn't let failure define them. They learned from it and kept moving. That sounds nice, but in the moment, failure feels terrible. How do you not let it derail you?
I think it helps to separate failure from identity. A setback is something that happened. It's not who you are. And if you can view it as information rather than judgment, you can use it to improve instead of spiraling into self-doubt.
That's a mindset shift that takes practice.
It does, and it's not easy, but it's essential if you want to play the long game.
Okay, let's get practical. Someone's listening right now. They've already made their 2026 goals. What should they do first?
I'd say look at your list and ask yourself, which of these goals are truly mine and which are borrowed? Be honest, if something doesn't resonate, remove it. It's better to have 2 real goals than 10 fake ones.
What's next?
Pick one goal to focus on first, just one. The temptation is to chase everything at once, but that spreads you too thin. Master one thing before adding more.
And then?
Then, build a simple system around that goal. What's the smallest daily action you can take? Do that every day. No excuses. Track it and be patient.
What about accountability? Should people tell others about their goals?
That depends on the person. For some, public accountability helps. For others, it backfires. They get the satisfaction of announcing the goal without actually doing the work. So know yourself.
That's a good point. Not every strategy works for everyone.
Exactly. And that's why generic advice is dangerous. You have to experiment and find what works for you.
Let me ask you something personal. What's one goal you've had that you got completely wrong, and how did you fix it?
Oh, that's a good one. A few years ago, I decided I wanted to become a morning person. I read all the books, I set alarms, I tried every trick, and I failed miserably. Every single time.
What went wrong?
I realized it wasn't really my goal. I wanted to be a morning person because I thought that's what successful people do. But it didn't fit my natural rhythm. I'm way more creative and focused at night, so I was fighting against my own biology.
So you gave up on mornings?
I gave up on forcing it. Instead, I designed my life around my natural energy patterns. I do creative work at night and save admin tasks for the morning. It works so much better.
That's a great example of adjusting the goal to fit reality instead of forcing reality to fit the goal.
Exactly. And it took me way too long to figure that out. But when I did, everything clicked.
What about you? Any goals you've messed up?
Many, but one that stands out is my relationship with money. For years, my goal was just to make more. More money, more security, more options, and I chased that hard.
What was wrong with it?
The goal was too vague, and it was fear-based. I was afraid of being broke, so I was always chasing, but I never defined what enough meant. So no matter how much I made, it never felt like enough.
How did you fix it?
I got specific. I figured out exactly how much I needed to feel secure and comfortable. Not rich, just stable. And once I hit that number, I gave myself permission to stop chasing. Now my goal is balance, not accumulation.
That's a big mindset shift.
It was, and it took years of anxiety to get there. But now I feel so much calmer about money because the goal is clear and realistic.
I think that's a lesson for everyone. Get specific. Define what enough means for you.
Absolutely. Otherwise, you'll chase forever and never feel satisfied.
Let's talk about something that doesn't get mentioned enough. Energy. Because I think a lot of goals fail simply because people are exhausted.
Yes, this is huge. You can have the best goal in the world, but if you're burnt out, you won't have the energy to pursue it. Energy management is just as important as time management.
So how do you protect your energy?
Sleep, for one, that's non-negotiable. Also, saying no to things that drain you and being intentional about recovery. You can't pour from an empty cup.
What about mental energy? Because that's different from physical tiredness.
Totally. Mental energy is about focus and decision fatigue. The more decisions you make, the more depleted you get. That's why simplifying your life helps. Fewer choices, more energy for what matters.
That explains why routines work. You're not deciding what to do, you're just doing.
Exactly. Routines automate the boring stuff, so your brain can focus on the important stuff.
We're coming toward the end here. What's one thing you hope people take away from this conversation?
I hope they slow down and question their goals before diving in. Not to be pessimistic, but to be honest. The more real your goals are, the more likely you are to achieve them.
What about you, Alex? What do you hope listeners remember?
Asking myself a question. Okay, I'll play. I hope people remember that change is slow, and that's okay. Don't expect overnight results. Trust the process, even when it's boring, especially when it's boring.
That's good. And I think we both agree that 2026 can be different if you approach it differently.
For sure. But it starts with honesty about what you really want, about why you want it, and about what you're willing to do to get it.
All right, let's wrap it up. This has been a really good conversation. Thanks for getting deep with me today.
Always. I think this is one of those episodes people might need to listen to more than once.
Agreed. So to everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. We hope this gave you something to think about as you plan your 2026. Be honest with yourself, start small, and trust the slow progress.
And remember, it's okay to change your goals if they're not really yours. Better to admit that now than to waste another year chasing the wrong thing.
Well said. That's it for the day. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time on The Talking Room.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.